from being forced to spend 90 days inside his house to potentially losing out on big fights against the likes of Devin Haney. This is why Gervonta "Tank" Davis has been arrested. Let's face it, the 28-year-old doesn't exactly have a clean record and has been involved in multiple controversial incidents before as well. But while he's managed to escape every single time, Davis finally has to serve a sentence for his crime now. In fact, the punishment might cost him dearly, because rather than being your run-of-the-mill fine or a slap on the wrist, the boxing superstar has actually been sentenced to 90 days of house arrest. For what? Well, if you remember, there was some buzz about an ongoing hit-and-run case during his fight against Ryan Garcia. And yeah, this is the end result of that. But wait, what did Tank even do to warrant such punishment? Okay, so around 2 a.m. on November 5th, 2020, Davis was behind the wheel of a Lamborghini, driving recklessly, because apparently he was super drunk. Now, it's worth noting that this was right after he'd successfully defended his WBA lightweight championship. As a matter of fact, he was on his way back from the celebration at a Baltimore nightclub because the crash happened 30 minutes after he'd left. Here's the problem though. The boxer wasn't just veering all over the place harmlessly. He actually swerved away from a police escort, ran a red light, and slammed straight into the passenger side of a Toyota Solara. Oh, and yeah, these hijinks of his also ended up injuring 4 people, including a pregnant lady who, according to reports, got a major knee injury that'll affect her for the rest of her life. However, that's not even the worst part about this whole incident. No, sir. Gervonta could have still recovered from this situation, but instead he made it worse by ignoring everyone and escaping from the scene. Yep, that's what the injured lady said at his sentence hearing. Apparently, Davis ignored her cries for help while she was trapped in the smoking car and simply chose to turn his back, thinking he could get away with it. What's more, the woman even claimed that the doctors told her she'd never be the same, and her knee is still damaged. Oh, and get this, she never received an apology from the boxer either. I feel like I don't matter. Imagine being 18 years old and the doctor saying you'll never be the same, she said. Interestingly though, the other 3 people involved in the crash were compensated by Davis, which makes the whole situation all the more confusing. Not to mention, the surveillance video shows Davis and a female passenger exiting the Lambo and escaping the scene in a black Chevy Camaro before cops arrived. But obviously, despite his attempts to get away unnoticed, there was way too much evidence of his involvement in the incident, so he had to come clean eventually. In fact, he even pleaded guilty to 4 out of the 14 counts, which were related to the fact that he fled the scene of a serious crash. Now, he was actually scheduled for trial, but since he entered a guilty plea instead, he managed to delay his trial until after his fight against Ryan Garcia. That being said, the sentence is out and it's not looking good for Gervonta, because a 90-day house arrest isn't the only punishment he's getting. On top of that, Tank also has to serve 200 hours of community service. What's more, the Baltimore Sun claims that he'll also spend 3 years on probation and has to attend sessions with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So he may have avoided jail time, but this isn't a small punishment by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, it's even worse for a boxer like him who's at the top of his game, because apparently, he won't even be able to leave his house to go to the gym. Although there are reports that the judge could reconsider his request on this one. That being said, people shouldn't think that the judge was being generous to Davis for a second due to his celebrity status. No sir, it was actually the opposite. Why? Well, you see, Gervonta doesn't own a house in Baltimore because if you didn't know, he actually lives in Florida. So he couldn't exactly serve a house arrest sentence without owning one, right? Here's the spicy bit though. Rather than allowing him to go back to Florida or giving out any other concession, the judge simply said that Davis would have to serve his 90-day sentence in jail if he couldn't find a residence in Baltimore. Although that obviously wasn't much of a problem since he can do that at his coach, Calvin Ford's house now. Besides, this isn't exactly a new experience for the boxer either. After all, he has been arrested before as well. In fact, Gervonta Davis has had a bunch of run-ins with the law over the years, and it all started in February 2019. Now, apparently Davis got into an argument with a man at an ATM in Virginia, and when the police arrived, well, he started arguing with them as well. Things really got out of hand, however, when he allegedly shoved a police officer. I mean, you don't get away from that one, do you? So he was charged with assault and an arrest warrant was issued for him as well. although TMZ reported that the case was later dropped. But as I've said, this was just the beginning of a long streak for Tank, because just a year after this incident, he was charged with domestic violence. Now this time around, he was at the University of Miami for a charity basketball game alongside his girlfriend, who he also has a daughter with. And in the video that went viral, Davis can be seen forcefully pulling her out of the seat and walking her out of the arena while arguing. Yikes! However, even though he was charged with simple battery domestic violence and surrendered himself to the police, he later made a social media post denying these allegations. He talked about how he was aggressive, but said he didn't actually hit her because she was the mother of his child. Interestingly enough, the post was later deleted as police actually released evidence of the charges against him. Now, this happened in February 2020, and only 9 months later, Gervonta went ahead and got himself in the hit-and-run case. Of course, he knew he was in trouble at that point, and any normal person would have sorted themselves out after such an incident. However, for better or for worse, Gervonta's anything but normal, and so in December 2022, Davis was arrested for assault. Although this was a bit of a bizarre case. Why? Well, apparently a woman called 911 saying a man was speeding at her, and that her and her baby's life was in danger. Oh, and the man in question? Gervonta Davis, of course. In fact, she called the police twice, screaming things like, "He attacked me," and "He's going to kill me." Not to mention, she even pressed the emergency button in her Mercedes and told the company about the situation. Now, the boxer was arrested and even had to spend an entire day in custody before he was released after a $1,000 bail. But here's the real kicker. The woman on the call turned out to be the mother of his child. What's more, Tank made a very angry post on Instagram as well, saying he'd never put his hands on his child's mother or his daughter, calling everyone crazy for even suggesting that. "I'm not a monster. I've been quiet for too long. That's the only reason I'm doing this now, just to clear my name," he wrote. In fact, even the woman released a statement later, saying that Davis didn't harm her or their daughter. Apparently, she called the police in the heat of the moment because she was frantic. She then apologized to everyone and said that they're gonna try to work on their relationship now. I mean, hey, maybe the boxer isn't as bad as people say he is. Still, all these cases and arrests aren't helping his situation. In fact, Gervonta Davis could legitimately lose out on career opportunities because of his antics. Take his house arrest, for example. He'll now be spending 3 whole months trapped inside a house and won't be able to train the way he wants. And that, of course, could affect his performance in the ring too. Not to mention, he's probably lost a ton of fans because of this latest arrest, and his name's forever been tarnished now. Like, no matter what he does from this point, he won't be able to erase this from his record. And there are other boxers who probably regret this as well, with Mike Tyson being the obvious one. Now, after beating Garcia, Gervonta is obviously looking at names like Devin Haney or Vasily Lomachenko for his next fight, to really establish himself as the greatest lightweight boxer on the planet. But who's to say that sponsors or these fighters won't back out of potential fights against him because of all this legal baggage he carries? So, even though he's probably going to be alright for now, he's got to tread super carefully from this point. After all, everyone's got their eyes on him now, and he needs to make sure he doesn't ruin his legacy in the sport. Well, there you have it. From being forced to spend 90 days inside his house to potentially losing out on massive career opportunities, that was why Gervonta "Tank" Davis has been arrested.